Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squared for boxing news and views from around the internet. Jarrell Miller gets the win versus Gerald Washington. As predicted, he didn't treat Washington with any respect throughout the fight. He just walked him down at every opportunity bar the first round and was very successful. And I've got to say, it was a pretty disappointing end in the end. Washington, well, he didn't look good right throughout the fight, didn't use the jab, didn't use the physical advantages that he had. He let Miller walk him down. He let the ring get cut off, and he was laying all over those ropes. It was really disappointing. And his fitness, where the hell was that at? Jarrell Miller looked in far better shape by the end of that fight than Washington. And it's not that Miller was bludgeoning Washington to death. Sure, he was landing and he was getting the better of the action, but Washington just looked a little bereft of ideas. So let's go back over the fight. So round one, Washington, he was moving really well. He was pumping that jab out there and he was looking good. So in the first round, Miller tried to start walking him down and cutting off the ring, but Washington was keeping him at bay and he was certainly landing more often, particularly with that jab. There was also a nice right hand that Washington landed on Miller, and you could tell that Miller felt it. I wouldn't say it hurt him, but he definitely felt that. And there was a bit of a dip after he took that shot, but he recovered quickly. So this is one of the few rounds that I actually gave Washington. Round two, Miller, he started really well. He was getting up in Washington's face, and he was really getting into the fight, landing some good shots, particularly to the body. And Washington was visibly slowing down after taking a few to the body midway through the round. And we didn't see Washington's jab nearly as much as the first round. And it was something that I was thinking, well, this is a bit of a concern. So round three, more of the same. Miller kept hunting Washington. And, Miller could be heard saying, "Come on, you pussy. Come on, pussy." Miller kept the pressure up the entire round. And he was landing a lot of good body shots. And that was really slowing Washington down. And visibly, Washington started to wilt a bit, and he was looking tired. And going back to the first round, the jab, it was just nowhere. It had evaporated. That was a big mistake. He needed to use his reach advantage to at least try keep Miller at bay at times. Wasn't always going to happen. But the other thing that was happening was when he got in, and this was largely an inside fight, Washington was allowing Miller to come up on him. They would go back to the ropes and they would fight all the action in close quarters. Washington would just lay on the ropes, but he wasn't throwing anything back of note. It was just truly bizarre. So if we go to round four, so between rounds, this is when I sort of noticed that Miller looked like he was starting to, not wilt, but he was sucking the big ones. And I was starting to think, oh, this will be interesting if this fight goes, maybe another 4 to 6 rounds. We'll have to see how Washington will hold up. But Miller's got the best of the action, and he really started a little run here. Started it with an uppercut, and then followed up a couple of punches later with a big hook that landed. He kept the pressure up the entire round, and he was looking really good. So that was definitely another Miller round. And Washington, he was looking a little uncertain of how to respond. And at this point, I was thinking, what is his game plan here? He doesn't know if he wants to be on the outside, but when he's on the inside, completely ineffective. And both of these guys at this point in the fight, they were looking tired. They'd visibly slowed down, even from the third round where they were looking a little bit off point. So I was thinking, well, it's not going to bode well for either of these guys the later it goes, and it might come down to a big punch here or there. And Washington, for the third round in a row, he'd given up on that jab. And he'd stopped circling. He was basically just moving back. That was his only way to get away from Miller, was to move back. It was a little bit disappointing, and he wasn't getting great advice from his corner either. It seemed to be that whatever instruction they were giving him, he either couldn't follow, couldn't execute, or he just wasn't listening to them. So round five, it was pretty much more of the same. It was basically all Miller. There were a couple of nice flurries by Miller, and Washington wasn't doing a lot. So this was also another round where I gave to Miller. Round 6, Washington out of nowhere explodes early in the round, and he hurt Miller. And not for the first time in this fight, but Miller quickly recovered because Washington just stopped. There was nothing. He took basically the rest of the round off, about 2 minutes or so. And the jab, again, it was MIA. And Miller finished quite strongly. So it was quite hard to score this one. I thought, well, actually, this was a pretty even round. So I would say a 10-10, but if I had to, I probably would give it to Miller just on the strength of he was basically doing most of the work for the last 2 minutes. Round 7, more of the same. Miller was just stalking and walking through Washington, and Washington really had no response. It was another good round for Miller. He really dominated. And essentially, round 8, it was more of the same. And as we know, at the end of that, Washington's corner threw in the towel. They waved it off and said, no muss, no muss. So in the end, it was really quite a disappointing end to the fight. I mean, there were certainly flashes there from Gerald Washington, but it just wasn't enough. So I wasn't overly thrilled with some of what Jarrell Miller did, but he did enough, and he did enough quite well and efficiently to get Gerald Washington out of there. And you'd have to say that Gerald Washington, on the strength of that performance, well, he is journeyman bound. That's the second time that he's stood up and basically been knocked back down by top-level opposition. Jarrell Miller, well, onto better and bigger things. You'd have to say that he's going to be rising up through some of the different sanctioning bodies on the strength of that performance, and we'll have to see where to from here. So, good win for Jarrell Miller. Terrible fight from Gerald Washington. Don't know what the hell he was up to, but yeah, we'll have to see what happens with the rest of the card. But good way to start that Adrian Broner, Mikey Garcia undercard. Hey, that's it from me. Hit like and subscribe. I'm out.